Welcome to this episode of Open Scripture, where we seek to sharpen the way the church reads her foundational texts. My name is Tracy McKenzie, professor of Hebrew and Old Testament at Southeastern Seminary. With me is Nick Nail, PhD student there at Southeastern as well, and also the worship leader at the church where we attend. We've been in these beginning chapters of Genesis, Nick, as well as, of course, we also spent some time with the whole view of the Pentateuch. Those things will continue to become clear as we continue this march through these early Genesis narratives. Last time we did Genesis 3, and we ended with the idea of complementarianism in Genesis 3. That is kind of the man's role to basically guard the command, if you will, also as the one who is responsible for obedience, and we could say for the household. We would extrapolate for the church as well. We saw that. We also saw, of course, the effects of the judgment upon the woman and the man, of course, as well as the curse on the serpent. And we also saw really the mention of the gospel, if you will, often called the proto-evangelion, the first mention of the gospel. We would probably back that up even earlier to Genesis 1:1, but at least, again, here we saw how really Genesis 3 cohered with Genesis 2, where the topic of marriage was introduced, and then Genesis 2, of course, fit with the sixth day in Genesis 1. So we're seeing this coherence between these narratives. And of course, we're seeing the prominence in the poetry and really working on interpretation here in these narratives.
Yeah. In the last two episodes, you had your wife, Beth, here. And so y'all were able to discuss marriage, not just from the sense of what the text has to say, but also just from your own experiences and how you've learned these texts, how you've led people through like marriage counseling, premarital counseling, things like that, using these very scriptures.
These very texts, these texts.
So I think that was really great.
You know, I've been thinking about this idea of the scripture is for you and about you. We hit on this several times. I've been thinking about this as I've kind of listened to our episodes and just thought about this. And I just want to again say, we're not talking, of course, about the common kind of devotionalizing where we make every narrative about us.
Right.
What we're really doing is showing how the author fashioned these texts for a future time and for a future people of God, which, of course, happens to be the people who are in Christ. That is the seed of Abraham. And we'll continue to say more about that even today.
Right. And you even used the term the author, and that's just another great reminder that, ultimately we do view God as the author, and he's using the real humans with their unique personalities and ways of writing to conduct these things. And we think that's what makes the scriptures even more amazing, is that it's not just this automatic writing down like a robot. I mean, God's using man.
That's right.
Through man to write this down.
Yeah, and it's going to be very important as we get into future episodes. Eventually, we'll do one here on biblical interpretation, and we will ground our interpretation in the intentionality that we discern in these texts, and that intentionality is going to be grounded in God's basically inspiring these texts, or we could say, expiring, that is breathing out these texts.
Yeah.
And so all of this, of course, is grounded, as you say, in the inspiration, but it does not negate God using man and his intentionality to write these things.
Yeah. So let's, before we jump into chapter 4, where we're going to be, just like last episode was very helpful for the application of marriage and living that out, just to jump back into the narrative at the end of 3, leading into chapter 4, man and woman, Adam and Eve, they were sent out from the garden, and it says, the Lord God sent him away from the Garden of Eden to work the ground from which he was taken. And he drove the man out, and stationed the cherubim and the flaming, whirling sword east of the Garden of Eden to guard the way to the tree of life. I don't know if that was hit on in the last episode. Did y'all talk about that?
I think we very quickly hit on that.
Okay.
Just again that man was barred from God's presence,
Right.
and basically kicked out of God's presence. And there are implications for this in the tabernacle later on in Exodus. It is a foreshadowing, basically, or a kind of a pre-writing of that narrative, as well as the temple. And of course, all of this will ultimately be fulfilled when we get back into God's presence by, again, the Lord Jesus Christ, the sacrifice of Jesus, as well as the gift of the Spirit. And we see this in Ezekiel and these other Old Testament books as well. So we commented on that. One other quick little tie that we're going to see here. We're basically in chapter 4, we're going to contrast Cain with Seth. So we're going to contrast, this is going to be our two main points. The son of Adam, who is Cain, and I should say the birth of Cain. I shouldn't use the word son because the text doesn't. And then the son of Adam, who is Seth, who is a seed, by the way, whereas Cain is not.
Let's rewind. What did you just say? That Cain wasn't listed as a son?
That's right. It's very important.
That's going to trip someone up.
It's very important that he's literally a man. This is we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Yeah.
But he's literally a man, so he's not a son. We're looking for a son.
Yeah.
Coming out of Genesis 3, we're looking for a son who is a seed.
Okay.
And we don't really find that with Cain, and sure enough, his morality bears that out. But in Seth, we find a son who is a seed, and it was the seed of woman. Remember in chapter 3 that would defeat the serpent. So this is basically our 2 points in Genesis 4.
Okay.
All right, you want to start us out here in 4:1, and we'll point this out.
Okay, chapter 4. The man was intimate with his wife Eve, and she conceived and gave birth to Cain. She said, "I have had a male child with the Lord's help."
All right, so this is very interesting. A lot of controversy here in this verse 1 to Genesis 4. And I think I want to point out, first of all, that, again, we see a new narrative begin here. We can see that because of the grammatical construction here in 4:1. This would be something like, now the man had been intimate with his wife, Eve, and she conceived and bore Cain. Now, the other interesting thing here is this: I have acquired. What'd yours say? I have
had a male child.
I have had a male child.
Yeah, that's CSB.
So yeah, you got the ESV handy?
Yeah.
Let's just see
I'm
what it
curious
says.
what the Hebrew says there, because ESV, I have gotten a man with the help of the Lord.
All right. So first of all, the word Cain and the word gotten there, or have had, in the CSB, is a word play.
Okay.
So it's Cain and Kana. Kana is the verb. So you can kind of hear it in the Hebrew that she birthed Cain, and she said, Kaniti. So I have caned Cain, basically, or I have birthed, we could say a boy or something like this. So there's this word play there in the explanation of Cain's name. Now, that's not so important to really understand Cain or understand who he is, but it is important to see that this is the way the author is going to work. He's going to use these word plays to draw attention to these children. This is going to be important when we come to other children, even all the way over at the end of chapter 4 and in chapter 5.
Yeah. All right.
So, moreover, we can return to this idea: I have acquired or gotten, literally, a man. I think yours said male child.
Yeah.
There's no word child here. It's literally, I have gotten a man.
That's what ESV says.
And then it just says Yahweh. It doesn't even say with the help of Yahweh. It just says with Yahweh, maybe, or there's no help.
I have gotten a man, comma, Yahweh.
Comma, Yahweh. Or it could be with Yahweh.
Okay.
So it could be implication of with the help of Yahweh. So again, it's controversial exactly what it means. I think in general, we can see here that I think probably the best way is to say with the help of Yahweh.
Yeah.
All right. So
But the
again,
words in Hebrew with the help are not in there.
not there. Not
Okay.
there.
So that's
So
a
again, it's interesting here that Cain is a man.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think the implication is he's not a son.
Hmm.
All right. Even though he is a son,
He is a son,
literally,
literally.
but
Yeah.
I mean, the text doesn't say it.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So she also gave birth to his brother Abel. Now Abel became a shepherd of flocks, but Cain worked the ground.
Okay. So again, don't have to say too much about this. I should have said also in verse 1 there that Eve is never mentioned again. The name Eve is not mentioned again in the whole Old Testament. So again, kind of crazy given how important she has been in chapters 2 and 3, but she's not mentioned again in the Old Testament, although I think her name comes up in the New Testament. But anyway, here in verse 2, we see again, of course, we have the brother Abel. And Abel, his name, Hevel, literally means breath or vanity. So there's no clear wordplay here, but some have suggested because he's only around for a moment, that's really what his name, vapor.
Yeah.
That's what his name kind of signifies as well.
Huh.
Now, again, we've not seen a shepherd of sheep or a keeper of flocks. We haven't seen either one of these words. We didn't see the word sheep in Genesis 1 or 2, and we haven't seen the word shepherd. So this is a bit of a new concept. More importantly, perhaps, is who it's contrasted with here, that Cain was a servant of the ground.
The Adamah.
The Adamah.
Yeah.
And a worker of the ground. Exactly what Adam was put in the garden to do.
Yeah.
So we see here that even though there's been disobedience, that Cain is still kind of tied to the ground. And of course, by the end of the chapter here, he's going to become unmoored from the ground, and that's going to be a problem for Cain.
Yeah. Well, verse 3. In the course of time, Cain presented some of the land's produce as an offering to the Lord.
All right, go ahead and read 4 here.
And Abel also presented an offering, some of the firstborn of his flock and their fat portions. The Lord had regard for Abel and his offering, but he did not have regard for Cain and his offering. Cain was furious, and he looked despondent.
All right. We could probably get the ESV in on that in a minute, but the point here, again, a lot of discussion around, what did Cain do wrong? What did Abel do something right? And the only difference here, they're both called an offering. Both of these offerings are acceptable in later Levitical code. The only difference would be the first fruits. And Abel brought these and Cain didn't. So that would be the only thing if we wanted to maybe infer that because Cain didn't bring a first fruit, that his heart was not right.
Also, what is the word for first fruit?
The word for first fruit here is bachor. Let me make sure I got it right here. Where's it at here? Verse
4.
Verse 4. Yeah, bachor.
So it's different than
Bachor.
the reshit.
Different than the reshit. That's
Okay.
right. Different word. This is the word. Reshit could be translated first fruit, and it is on a couple occasions. But this is the word first fruit.
Okay.
This really is the main word for first fruit. So I don't necessarily, commentaries disagree on this. They sometimes say, well, it was the first fruit, and that was the difference. But I don't think so. I think the point here, I think the author's keeping this very short, very abbreviated. His main point is not that one did something wrong and one did something right. It's like, no, the Lord did not regard Cain, even though he was the firstborn.
Yeah.
So I think that's the larger point here. We're going to see this time and time again, that even though in the Levitical law code, or I think it's Deuteronomy in the law code, it's really the firstborn that's going to inherit everything. the Lord constantly in these Genesis narratives is upending that right of the firstborn and giving the blessing to the second child. We can see this with Isaac.
Mm-hmm.
We can see this with Jacob.
Yeah.
I mean, we can see this with Joseph and with Judah. Neither one of those are firstborn.
Yeah.
So this seems to be a pattern, and I think we see it here first, and we don't really get the full explanation of why the Lord did not regard Cain's offering. We just know that he didn't. And of course, this causes Cain trouble, and as you ended there, it was very angering to Cain, and his countenance fell. And then let's pick it up in verse 6 there.
Then the Lord said to Cain, "Why are you furious? And why do you look despondent?"
All right, so again, we just see here that obviously, now we know that from the garden interaction after the disobedience, that man feared, he was ashamed, he was suspicious. Remember, he threw his wife kind of under the bus, and the woman didn't do great either, right? And so here we see that Cain is afraid and he's angry. He's basically insecure. And it makes him angry because the Lord looked with pleasure, basically, upon Abel's offering and didn't to Cain's offering. So I think we can see how we ourselves kind of act in Cain when somebody else gets attention and we don't, and how we're insecure and it makes us angry.
Right.
And, I can see this all day long in my own life and heart, and I have to really guard against it.
Now I'm trying to, be aware of the type of questions that, people would ask that aren't as familiar with maybe some of these texts. So if Adam and Eve were kicked out of the garden, so they were kicked out of the presence of God, and now we have Cain still talking to the Lord, because the Lord said to Cain, so he still has some interaction. So he might be kicked out of the presence, but God still is involved, very much involved in their life.
Yeah.
How would you explain what's happening there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question, and it's the Lord and Cain have more of an interaction than anybody else in these narratives. But again, I think the point that the author is making is that the Lord is giving Cain this opportunity to overcome these negative emotions, and Cain is going to fail, and because of that, Cain is cursed, and then Cain is even going to get kicked farther away from the Lord's presence to where then it really does require mediation, and that I think is the point.
Yeah. Okay. So then verse 6, why are you furious? Why do you look so despondent? Verse 7, if you do what is right, won't you be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is for you, but you must rule over it.
All right, and here is that clause that we saw back in, I think, chapter 3, verse 16, where the woman's desire was for her man, but he would rule over her. Now we see, here it is in verse 7, that sin is crouching at the door. And I really love the way this is articulated here, that sin is personified.
Right.
And I think that the point here is probably this is the serpent, or even this is a demon. There's even actually a connection. I think it's through another cognate language, Akkadian, where there's a word here that this term here refers to how a demon guards a doorway to buildings. Think of gargoyle, right? Think of gargoyle. That's how the terminology here relates. So I don't know. That might be a little bit of a stretch because its relationship is to a language other than Hebrew.
Yeah.
But I think that's the idea here. And sin, you think of a robber or somebody who's going to ambush you from behind a door. That's what sin is like. And again, I think we can see so much similarity to our own lives.
Yeah.
And how sin kind of sneaks up on us. And of course, in the New Testament, the devil prowls around like a roaring lion. So again, we have something similar here.
Yeah.
And of course, Cain has this opportunity to overcome sin if he just would have listened to the Lord. The Lord even kind of warns him. But of course, we can see it doesn't happen.
So then, verse 8, Cain said to his brother Abel, "Let's go out to the field." And while they were in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him.
All right. So again, questions here. The Hebrew doesn't have "let us go out in the field." So it just says, "And Cain said to his brother," and then we never hear what he said.
Really?
Yeah. And this is a famous kind of text critical variant. The versions like the Septuagint, the early Greek translation of the Old Testament, it has something. There's a discussion of whether it's added for clarity or whether somehow it dropped out. Again, I think it's one of those things where the author is inviting us to wonder, what did Cain say to him?
Well, so ESV is interesting then,
Okay.
because ESV, it says, Cain spoke to Abel, his brother, and when they were in the field, Cain rose up against his brother and killed him. So there's no quotation.
That's right. There's no quotation. So
ESV,
that would be
a little better.
Yeah, the ESV there basically did what the Hebrew has. Again, there could be a variant, so I don't mind the CSB, but just so we know, we actually don't get the words. And again, I think it's meant to draw us into the story. It's like, wow, how did he get him out there? I mean, what did he promise? I mean, you can see his kind of slickness, that he's going to basically lie to Cain, or you can see lie to Abel. You can see the premeditation here to get him out in the field. And of course, we see right away Cain arose over his brother and he killed him. So again, very little information of how it happened. So the author doesn't want to dwell on it. It's just the fact that, boom.
Yeah, right after the warning of like, hey, don't sin.
That's
and
right.
The next verse,
That's
he sins.
That's right. He sins.
Yeah.
And this basically is the fruit of Adam and Eve's disobedience. The jealousy and the anger. We even see here, again, how anger, basically, really at the root of anger is hatred and jealousy. So again, we could spend an entire episode on maybe some of the ethics leading out of this discussion. And again, you can see you can see an echo in Jesus's words in the New Testament about, you've heard that it said, thou shalt not murder, but I say to you, if anyone looks with anger or speaks, you fool, he is in dangers of the fiery hell.
Yeah.
So, all right. So now we get another personification in the next verse. Verse 9.
Then the Lord said to Cain, "Where is your brother Abel?" "I don't know," he replied. "Am I my brother's guardian?" Or more famously known, "Am I my brother's keeper?"
Yeah, am I my brother's keeper? And actually the personification is coming in verse 10, not verse 9. But it is interesting. Adam was supposed to keep the garden, and now Cain is kind of wanting a negative reply. Kind of, it's a rhetorical question. But of course, the Lord is not going to give him a negative reply. But you can see him kind of asking sarcastically. And again, in a sense, lying or trying to stretch the truth, as it were.
Yeah. So then you have the word keep, which we've already had, and then you have the word know. I don't know. So is that a word play as well?
Yeah, I do not know, right? Because again, we've had that word. You're right.
Yeah.
You remember knowing good and evil, and the Lord will know on the day you eat of it. The Lord will know, or you will know that you will know wisdom. So yeah, there's that word that's an important word here, as well as the word brother is repeated here a bunch. All right.
Okay, verse 10. So then he said, "What have you done? Your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground."
All right. So here is the personification. The blood is crying out, right? So again, this kind of personifies this blood has this voice. And also it's from the ground. We have another repetition of brother here. And moreover, we have here his question, "What have you done?" This is just like his question to the woman.
Yep.
What have you done? It's the same exact words here. And so again, it really echoes that narrative before this.
And then verse 11, so now you are cursed, alienated from the ground that opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood you have shed. If you work the ground, it will never again give you its yield. You will be a restless wanderer on the earth.
All right, so quite a bit going on here in verse 11. Cursed are you. So Cain is the first human that is cursed. You remember the serpent was cursed. This is exact same phraseology here. Cursed are you. And then also, cursed are you from the ground. So now, again, the ground here is personified. The ground opened its mouth to take the blood of your brother from your hand. So we also see here that, again, if you think about it from the Pentateuch's perspective here, the ground is a bit of a cleanser. Kind of a wastewater treatment plant, if you will, sewage treatment, right? The ground is supposed to be basically take care of some of the waste or the sewage, and here it does it through the blood. And we also see an echo here of the ground being cursed. And the Sabbaths were supposed to sort of cleanse the land, cleanse some of these things, but it wasn't enough. So we have that going on here as well. I think you also read verse 12. Now it says, when you serve the ground, or when you work the ground, again, this is what Adam was supposed to do. He was supposed to work the ground. Even after the curse, he was going to work the ground, but it would now produce thorns and thistles. So here, Cain is going to work the ground, but it will no longer give its strength to him. So he's basically going to be cut off from the ground in the next little verses here. And he's going to be a vagrant and a wanderer in the land. So in other words, he's not going to have a connection to the land. This is going to signal a major problem with no connection. It's going to end up in him and his progeny going to cities. Again, another signal that something's wrong.
So my CSB has in 14, you will be a restless wanderer on the earth. Is that restless word there? You'll become a restless wanderer?
Well, it's the same as in verse 12. So verse 12 says, it will no longer give its strength to you. A vagrant and a wanderer you will be in the land. And then verse 13, Cain said to the Lord, my punishment is too great to forgive or to bear. And then 14, from the face of the ground, from your face, I have been hidden. I will be a vagrant and a wanderer in the land.
Okay. I was trying to draw a connection between the Lord rested on the seventh day, but not the same.
No, not the same word.
Okay.
Not the same word. Now, interestingly enough, Cain's going to go out from the presence of the Lord. This is in verse 16, and he's going to dwell in the land of Nod, and that's the word wander. So he's basically going to dwell in Wanderland.
Yeah.
Instead of Wonderland, it's Wanderland. He's going to be in Wanderland.
Hmm.
And again, the point here is he's cut off from the land, and it's not going to give its produce to him. And again, this is basically going to mean he's going to have to rely on other things than the ground, which of course puts him in danger. So let me comment on verse 13 here just quickly. I alluded to it. My punishment is too great either to forgive or to bear. Cain is complaining here. I think it's probably a ambiguous on purpose. Either one of those would work, and I'm guessing different translations go different directions there. But the point is that Cain is in trouble. 14, as you mentioned, he gets cast out, just like Adam and Eve were cast out. Cain is cast out, and he's also not only cast out of the garden from the face of the ground, but he's also hidden from God's face. And this is where I said he's going to, need mediation because he's going to be hidden from the face of God. All right, you want to pick it up there, maybe read 14, 15, and 16. We'll finish this part and move on to the next part.
So 14, since you are banishing me today from the face of the earth, I must hide from your presence and become a restless wanderer on the earth. Whoever finds me will kill me. So then the Lord replied to him, "In that case, whoever kills Cain will suffer vengeance 7 times over." And he placed a mark on Cain so that whoever found him would not kill him. Then Cain went out from the Lord's presence and lived in the land of Nod, east of Eden.
All right, so he dwells in this Wanderland, if you will, land of Nod. Again, a wordplay there. And he's east of Eden, so he's out of the garden, away from the Lord's presence. The Lord did have mercy on Cain. He put this sign on him, as well as he basically said, he will be avenged sevenfold. So again, we see a bit of the mercy of the Lord here as he even casts him out from his presence. All right. Now, 17 basically through 24 is the next little unit here. And it basically is the genealogy. This is kind of the first time we've ran into a genealogy. And the whole point is to move us quickly to whatever the Lord wants to focus on.
Yeah.
So we can move quickly through the genealogy until we get to the 7th generation from Adam. And the 7th generation from Adam is going to rest on the attention where the author wants to.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to let you read for a while there.
Okay. So 17, Cain was intimate with his wife, and she conceived and gave birth to Enoch. We can come back to this, but where did his wife come from?
Okay. Good.
So then Cain became the builder of a city, and he named the city Enoch after his son. Irad was born to Enoch. Irad fathered Mehujael. Mehujael fathered Methushael. And Methushael fathered Lamech. Lamech took 2 wives for himself, one named Adah and the other named Zillah. Adah bore Jabal. He was the first of the nomadic herdsmen. His brother was named Jubal. He was the first of all who play the lyre and the flute. Zillah bore Tubal-Cain, who made all kinds of bronze and iron tools. Tubal-Cain's sister was Naamah.
All right. So there you finished 22, right?
Yeah.
All right. So again, we see the genealogy, and it moves quickly through the genealogy, I think really in one verse, until we get to the 7th in the genealogy. So we can again see here a focus on 7s. And Lamech, I call this Lamech the terrible. We're going to see a Lamech in the next genealogy in chapter 5 as well. But here, Lamech breaks out of the pattern of the genealogy, because if we think about it, the genealogy basically says so-and-so bore so-and-so, and this just is repeated until we reached Lamech. And then we get information on Lamech's sons and wives and so on and so forth. So the real focus here of Lamech is he took 2 wives. It says Lamech took 2 wives. Let's see, this is basically in verse 19. Lamech took for himself 2 wives. And this is set in contrast to Adam, who God brought 1 wife. So like we said last time, polygamy is out of bounds here. So we see this contrast between Lamech, Cain's son, and what God did for Adam. And then again, just quickly here, the rest of these children that Lamech bore are people of cities, and this multiplier of bronze and these different inventors of thing. And largely, most commentators say this is kind of negative because again, they are off the ground. They're not using the produce of the ground. Instead, they're multiplying implements of war and things like this to basically fend for themselves. And again, we're going to see the contrast here. I do think this is correct. It doesn't make as much sense to us who live in cities and enjoy that. But again, here in these early Genesis narratives, these 2 things are set in contrast to one another. You've got Adam, who was supposed to be a man of the ground and have a connection to the ground for its produce. And then you have Cain and his kids who wind up in cities, and Lamech even names the name of the city after the name of his son. And then in verse 23, we're going to bust into poetry, another way the author keeps our attention on things. And let's see what he says in verse 23.
All right, so Lamech said to his wives, Adah and Zillah, "Hear my voice, wives of Lamech. Pay attention to my words, for I killed a man for wounding me, a young man for striking me. If Cain is to be avenged 7 times over, then for Lamech it will be 77 times.
All right, so here Lamech is boasting. Again, this is poetry, like we mentioned before, poetry in chapter 1, poetry in chapter 2, poetry in chapter 3, each of those times being very important. Here we get this poetry here where Lamech is boasting basically about killing. And we see here, again, the fruit of Cain's disobedience and his fratricide. His great-great-great-great-great-grandson is also a murderer. Even the possibility of murdering 2 people. I mean, again, this is a common question here. Does he murder 2, or does the parallelism of the poetry mean he's just doing 1? He just kills 1, even though he brags about it here in these poetic lines. Either way, it's a tragedy. I think because of the conjunction, he probably kills 2 people. One of them is even a child, it seems like here. So Lamech here is a poor example of a person. And he even wants avenged 77-fold. So again, we see the focus on 7s. He's 7th in the genealogy. Cain wanted avenged 7-fold. So again, all of these are ways to keep the spotlight on what Cain's sons or seed or progeny lines up with. That is murder, boasting, making implements, and living in cities.
Yeah.
Now, if we just move over quickly, we have 2 verses for Adam's other son.
Adam was intimate with his wife again, and she gave birth to a son and named him Seth. For she said, God has given me another offspring in place of Abel, since Cain killed him.
All right. Now, there's quite a bit of explaining we have to do here in these 2 verses. First of all, we have here that Adam knew his wife again. So this goes all the way back to verse 1 of chapter 4. So here we see, again, a contrast between the birth of Cain and what his progeny ended up as, and what's going to be Seth here. All right. So he knew his wife. Notice that she birthed the son. So here we're paying attention to this son. And she called his name Seth. Now, she called his name, or to call a name, is going to be repeated several times in the next chapter or so, and it's going to be very important. So she calls his name Seth. We have another wordplay, and it's because God sethed him to me. In other words, Seth means gift. So we could say she called him gift because God gave him to me. So here we see, similar to I have begotten a man with the Lord, only this time it uses the word God. God literally gave Seth to me, and it's also a seed. So again, this is all intentional. The author wants to say something. This son, Seth, is related to the seed of the woman who would defeat the enemy. And sure enough, we're going to see that as we continue to move through this narrative.
And in place of Abel, so meaning Abel was the original kind of son?
Yeah, probably in place of Abel, whom Cain slew. So
Yeah.
I would say, again, this is all meant to be in contrast to Cain.
Yeah, okay.
All right, verse 26.
A son was born to Seth also, and he named him Enosh. At that time, people began to call on the name of the Lord.
All right, so again, a lot going on here. To Seth also was born a son. So we have the issue of a son born again, only this time it's to Seth. So Enosh is a son of Seth. Seth is a son of Adam. Now we could ask the question, who is Adam a son of? And we'll have to get to that in chapter 5, but we'll see that, and that's part of the purpose here. Now, he called his name, like I said, that's important. So he called his name. What did he call his name? He called his name Enosh. And Enosh means men or mankind. It's the plural word for man.
Hmm.
So here, Seth names him Enosh, and then it says, then it was begun to call on the name of the Lord. Read your last clause there.
At that time, people began to call on the name of the
Yeah,
Lord.
there's no word people in
Yeah.
that clause.
Yeah, same thing for ESV. They're assuming people.
That's right. And I think it's good to assume it. Again, I would say the author leaves it out here to connect it back to Enosh.
Mm-hmm.
So he does it purposefully because the progeny of Seth
Mm-hmm.
ends up being mankind or men who call on the name of the Lord.
So that's significant that we have the son, the actual son, the seed is now when people are back to calling on the
Calling
Lord.
on the name of the Lord. So there's this idea of worship. If you call on the name of, first of all, you have call the name, which is again going to be important as we move forward here. And you got calling on the name of Yahweh, this tetragrammaton. So they are worshiping, seemingly worship the Lord.
Yeah.
So you have one line of Adam who literally ends up in worship. The other line of Adam who ends up in murder, boasting, and polygamy.
Wow.
So what we're going to do then is we're going to trace this lineage into the following narratives. And again, you won't believe how the author keeps our eye on the lineage, which will end up with the Lion King of Judah, who, of course, will end up being Jesus of Nazareth. So join us next time as we show you how the Scripture is for you and about you.